This week on Barbell Shrugged, we talk about deadlift!
Three, two.
Got me all turned on. Welcome to Barbell Shrugged. I'm Mike Bledsoe here with Doug Larson and Christopher Moore.
Boom test.
Today we're going to be talking about deadlifts. We were sitting around and thinking, what should we talk about next? And we were like, man, we had a shit ton to say about squats.
Yeah, and that was a good episode.
And we had a really great time doing that. And so we figured we'll talk about deadlifts.
There's a virtual cornucopia of just a treasure trove of things you can talk about with the deadlift.
And at first I was thinking, man, how are we going to fill up at least 40 minutes of show talking about deadlifts? But then I thought about the squats. I thought the same thing there. And then we talked for an hour and a half.
Then Doug filled up like 5 iPad pages worth of notes.
Which is like
everything resolved itself.
Which is like 1 page in real life. But whatever.
I don't know. I don't know what to say about that, man.
So, real quick, make sure you guys get over to barbellshrugged.com, sign up for the newsletter. We got a lot of new stuff going on, and if you want to be informed about what's happening next and when new episodes post, make sure to head on over there, put your email in. What do they get, Doug, if they put their email address in on barbellshrugged.com?
A sweet video of you with Rich Froning, the top 8 snatch mistakes. Number 8 snatch mistake is a special top secret.
It's a secret. You have to put your email in to find out what number 8 is.
Oh,
And it's pretty funny, so if you haven't seen it yet, go check it out.
There used to be 7 snatch mistakes, but now there's 8. So, I mean, you obviously don't know.
Is 8 a secret massage tip between you and Rich? That people can see if they share the extra special emails?
Did you touch yours?
I didn't touch it, man. It's just
We got a buzz going.
Our buzz is back.
It's the opposite of a buzz kill. It's a bad thing.
Buzzkill is a bad thing.
Well,
Stop. You're good. You're good.
It's gone.
Oh, it's gone.
Temporarily.
Good job,
Don't touch
Doug.
anything.
good job, dude.
That didn't work.
I have no idea if that was me, but I'm taking credit.
Yeah. We'll give you the credit. That's okay. Also, we have the 6-month muscle gain program starting up in like a week.
About 2 weeks, the
2 weeks.
registration will open, and then it'll open about 5-6 weeks from right now, something like that.
It begins very beginning of October, but we let people register the month before. Make sure to go and sign up for that because it's sold out the last couple times. So we'll see what happens this time.
You can go to muscle.barbellshrugged.com if you want to have or see more information about that program.
Awesome.
The registration will open up, and then your life will open up to a whole new set of strength possibilities.
So, Doug, why would we want a deadlift?
All right, so basic things for a deadlift. In my opinion, deadlifts and, as a side note, pull-ups are my 2 favorite things to judge if you've gotten overall stronger. It has a great yes-no quality about it. If you picked it up off the ground and you got it locked out, you did it. There wasn't like, oh, you didn't hit depth or you bounced the weight or anything like that. So deadlift is probably my favorite thing for assessing overall total body strength from pushing on the ground all the way out to your hands.
But there's still plenty of people who will bitch and moan about the way you deadlift. I saw this video. This was true. Again, we talked about as we were doing our pre-gaming over coffee and bullshit. I saw a YouTube video of who's one of the giant strongmen. I think this guy used to be he's like 6'8". Brian Shaw. He's like 6'8", like 450 pounds. This is the biggest human being I think that is alive now, and just strong as hell. But there's a video of him doing a 985 deadlift,
Right.
single. No, I didn't think anybody would ever argue that that's strong. And here is a fucking guy who posted on the YouTube page. Sorry for my hard P's, ladies and gentlemen. Don't bang me on the comments for that. I'm doing hard P's this morning. But somebody says, "Oh, yeah, pretty strong, I guess, bro, but he's wearing straps, so it doesn't count." You go, wow, man. The guy deadlifted 985 pounds. which is sort of a rare instance.
Well, if we all put straps on, we could deadlift that.
Oh,
night, you
yeah.
know?
But that's, as soon as you start arguing with trolls on the internet, just keep that in mind that somebody out there will call a 1,000-pound deadlift not strong. You cannot win. The force is too strong with these ones.
Right.
These are not the droids you're looking for. Avoid at all costs. Trouble. No,
Yeah, if you're a smaller guy, like a double bodyweight deadlift isn't that crazy, but it's not like that for bigger guys. That strength curve isn't linear. Like it tapers off the bigger you are. You can do a triple bodyweight clean if you weigh 110 pounds, but you can't do a triple bodyweight clean if you're 350.
So let me just take a pause and say the deadlift, like Doug is saying, is probably like the definitive test of strength. Can you pick up that heavy ass weight or can you not? It's like wrestling. It's like throwing something heavy for distance. It's a fundamental test of your awesomeness as a strong person, the degree to which you are awesome. And yes, if you wear straps to do it, that's fine. If that makes you feel good, it's still a really good thing to do.
And I think
Don't worry
you kind of
about
make the point is you're using this as a measure to see if you got stronger. So this may not be like the number one test of strength across the spectrum of all fitness. You know what I mean? Like, well, I deadlift more than you, so I'm stronger than you. It's,
Well, it's mechanical.
It's a thing about like, am I stronger than I was before?
That's a good point. Yeah.
So, because I honestly don't think, I mean, the deadlift can't be just the only thing we're looking at for overall strength.
That's not the end all be all, but it's the one that I like to use just because I'm better at deadlifting than I am at
That's
squatting.
exactly what I was about to say. It's because he's better at it.
Well, like, but you know, you can find other things that are good tests of strength, but nothing you could argue being just better than.
Yeah, the problem with some say why I do agree with you is like something like a squat, you know, because one guy might be squatting deeper than another, and you know, just because
high bar versus low bar stance, shoes, belts, wraps. It's more complicated.
With the deadlift, you reach down, you pick up the barbell, you stand up. Yeah, you did it or you didn't do it.
And then when you set the world record in your local Globo gym, then all the hot chicks come to you and want to hang out with you. And then you drive away in your car that is now a Porsche. Everything opens up to you because the world loves good deadlifters. The fucking universe loves that shit.
Oh, man. So another point, it's a raw strength thing. It's not super technical. So it's not
compared to snatching. It's not really that technical. It's easier to learn. So if you're brand new, then it's an easier movement to pick up. It doesn't take you 3 years to perfect your deadlift in most cases, unless you have some severe mobility issues coming in.
And if you're the guy who's like, what do you mean they're different? Aren't all these pulls the same? Then you shouldn't be listening to this show.
Maybe you should be listening to this show because we're going to talk about how they're different.
Well, maybe, okay. Well, that's the point.
Stay tuned.
I know plenty of people who are like, why is a deadlift different than a snatch?
We're about to tell you all the differences, but Chris is going to say, if you don't know, you shouldn't be here.
Go away.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah. The other reason that we're talking about deadlifts is that it's probably the most fundamental movement pattern that there is just in your regular everyday life. Like everyone picks up stuff off the ground. If you're going to school, you look at, my backpack's on the ground. You go over there and you pick it up, and it's good to have a fundamental knowledge about how to pick things up just in the regular everyday world.
That's a very good point, Doug.
Common sense tip number 500.
Yeah.
Sometimes in life you got to pick things up off the things.
Well, we've said that on the show many times. We're not teaching people how to lift weights. We're teaching people how to move, and weights are just a very convenient thing to teach people with.
And that's why getting better at deadlifts makes you better at picking up your school books.
Being a human being.
And then you become smarter, and you form your own entrepreneurial venture when you graduate, and then you become rich and a millionaire. And because then now you actually get all the chicks in the mansions because you learn how to deadlift. That's true.
Third idealism he's putting in
This
the show.
is what Chris believes now. Before he believed that deadlifting will get him chicks, but now he thinks money will.
You opened up my consciousness. Well, I was listening to Barbell Business, so.
Oh, well, that'll happen.
I've been enjoying those episodes lately.
Yeah, so like when I teach fundamentals, one of the things I really make a good point to say is this is not something you only use in the gym. When you go home, practice deadlifting, whether it's a pencil, golf ball, baby, whatever. Use this form whenever you do anything. Because those guys that hurt their back picking up golf balls, it's because they're doing it wrong. They reach over, they're slouched all over. If you go down and you pick up a golf ball like you deadlift, the potential for injury pretty much goes away. And that's kind of what I try to, when I'm teaching somebody new, that's kind of where we go.
Yeah, it's not an unsafe movement. I've had, like my mom, for example, growing up, I'm a high school kid, I'm 17 years old, and I go, oh, I deadlifted 400 pounds today. And my mom's like, oh my God. Like when I was first getting into this,
Oh my God, Doug, you're going to blow your back out.
Right.
My little boy, picking up 400 pounds.
I've always been very fortunate that I had really good mobility. I did gymnastics when I was really young, and I've had good flexibility my whole life. So I never had mobility issues. I was always able to, as a person with good deadlifting leverage, get into a good position.
Yeah.
So I've been very fortunate to have pretty good deadlift technique pretty much since day one, which is awesome. And so, and also having a good strength coach since day one as well. I was always in an environment where I wasn't like metconning with deadlifts on my first day, where I was like super fatigued and my back was like bowing like a scared cat. Like
the next day, somebody's like, you know what we did yesterday? 800 rounds of deadlifts. What should we do today? One arm deadlift.
That's right.
Which is like that, but I kind of make that joke. But see, I had the opposite experience as Doug, where my foundation was self-taught through high school, and then getting involved with a strength and conditioning crew when I played college football. They didn't know what the fuck they were doing. So I ended up blowing out like 2 lumbar discs because we would do things like, what do we do on Monday? We pulled a heavy rack pull. What should we do today? Probably try to beat that rack pull PR 5 days later. Yeah, right. So dude, I mean, honestly, so with rounded back and people who thought deadlifting was just try harder, just like their squats and everything else, you want to get better, just, I see you rounding, just let's keep the weight on your back and let's have you try not to round. That was the approach to teaching all this shit.
Don't round.
So that ruined my football career forever. That destroyed my back. It took me 10 years to build it back.
I think we're gonna get into that, especially after. What's going on here?
Dog tail between my legs.
Dog's gonna unplug things.
You should probably get the dog out of the podcast studio. It's so
just
unprofessional.
Just to close that loop a little bit, not to talk about how I had great deadlifting technique, and I just like to talk about myself. The reason I brought that up was
an asshole.
Was that growing up, I would have good technique and I would be doing it in a safe manner, but still, my mom not knowing anything about weightlifting, she'd say, well, like you're gonna screw your back up if you keep doing that, and I would say, I don't know, like it's not a fundamentally unsafe thing to do. If I walk over to my backpack as an example and I pick it up, do you think that's unsafe? And she's like, well, no. I'm like, well, that's not that different. It's the exact same thing. The only reason that picking up my backpack is safe is because I'm strong enough to do it correctly. Well, if I'm strong enough to do 400 pounds correctly, then it's still safe. As long as my technique doesn't change and I don't get out of position and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The movement pattern isn't the thing that's unsafe. It's safe if you can do it correctly and you're strong enough to do it correctly with hundreds of pounds, then it's okay.
Is that when your mom was like, what in the hell have I give birth to? This little smart creature is already functioning at this level. Tell me. That's a pretty wise thought to have when you're in fucking high school.
Yeah, again, I was very lucky to have a competent strength coach growing up. A lot of people didn't, 15, 20
your
years ago.
Your mom's like, yeah, that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm still trying to teach my mom how to turn on a fucking DVD player.
So what kind of different deadlifts do we have? I mean, there's about a million different ways that we can practice picking things up off the ground.
There's a lot of variety, and depending on your body type and your mobility, like there's some that might not be very good for you to do or very safe for you to do, and there's some that are still a good option. So everyone knows classic regular deadlifting, I'll say, where your feet are basically hip width apart and your hands are hanging basically straight down from your shoulders and you're pulling on a regular bar at regular bumper plate height. It's a regular deadlift. Then you got sumos and snatch grip deadlifts and Olympic, like clean and snatch deadlifts. You got hex bar deadlifts and deficit deadlifts and rack pulls, like Chris was saying. Mm-hmm. There's a ton of different types of deadlifts, and again, like I said, the one that you choose that works out best for you, that'll depend on a variety of factors. How much training experience you have, whether you're a beginner or an advanced lifter, how tall you are even.
What your overall leverages are and how long your femurs are.
Yeah, you don't have to get stuck in this world of only one single type of deadlift. I was teaching fundamentals the other day, and a guy came in, and he's an older guy. He was probably, I'll be generous and say he was 60, maybe 55 or 60 years old, and he had very poor mobility. And everyone comes through and does a practice deadlift with 95 pounds, and they all look good enough to get by for the moment, just to say, you're probably a little bit around there. We'd want to make this change and that change. But then one guy comes in and he looks significantly worse than the rest of the group. So for that guy having very poor mobility, and after talking to him, he already has a back injury, he probably isn't going to pull deadlifts from the floor with a regular bar. For that guy, we're probably going to have him do maybe some type of a hex bar deadlift or a sumo deadlift, something that's a little more conservative and a little bit easier to get into a good position. It's easier to get into position because you don't need quite as much range of motion with those other movements. And then we'll probably have to elevate the bar a little bit so he can start not at mid shin, but more like maybe above the knee, like he's doing a rack pull, because that's the position that he can get a neutral spine with. He can't get a neutral spine any lower than that.
Yeah, I'd say it reminds me of, I posted a video on the Barbell Shrugged wall of me doing a speed pull, which is just a fancy way of saying I used a little less weight and I pulled it as fast as I could. Getting a good training effect without beating my back up. And I did it standing on 3 or 4 rubber mats, so my feet are elevated higher than they normally would be. So that's called a deficit deadlift because you're pulling from a deficit. Very good exercise. And then somebody posted on there, kind of joking, but he said, yeah, this is great. I might try this. But I did hear one time Eric Creasy call this the stupidest exercise ever.
Yeah, he just wrote an article about that not too long ago.
And I think the point I want to make is, obviously I like Eric. Eric's a smart guy, but my point is that I think everybody should really stop thinking in terms of what is the best version of exercise to do, because that just all depends on you and where you're at. All these are just tools that could be amazingly effective for you. If you can't grab a bar at regular bar height mid shin without rounding over, then for you the regular deadlift becomes a silly thing to do because you're going to maybe hurt yourself.
Well, I find
no one would call deadlift silly, but doing that now for you could be. So the better option is a hex bar, and you could walk down. The same thing goes for if you've got your experience with altered physiology, altered mechanics. For Eric, it might be stupid. For me, I get really strong and fast when I try this kind of exercise.
Well,
so there's no such thing as stupid and not stupid.
I mean, Eric doesn't train guys to get bigger deadlifts, right? He doesn't train powerlifters. He trains primarily baseball players. Yeah, these are baseball. And the same thing when you got some of these other coaches. What's his face? Does mostly hockey players. And so he's Mike Boyle. Mr. Single Leg, right? So, these guys may badmouth squatting or back squats or deadlifts or something like this, but these are guys that they are not in the business of training powerlifters or even a lot of times not even general population.
Yeah, Mike Boyle badmouths deadlifts quite a bit, but Eric Cressy loves deadlifting. He talks about deadlifting all the time.
He's a really good deadlifter too.
He really is.
Really good deadlifter.
He deadlifts like
630 or something at least.
650. He's chasing 700. I don't know if he's gotten it yet. At like 180 pounds.
Yeah, and his body weight, he can't be more than like 6 feet tall, right? I mean, that's a good lift.
Yeah, I want to say he's relatively short. I've never met him, but I don't think he's over 6 foot.
Yeah, so that's good. Sometimes these guys, their sole focus is on improving these guys in this one sport. And maybe putting taking a baseball player and having him do a bunch of overhead presses isn't good, but it doesn't mean it's not good for everybody.
So you can use these really fancy kinds of deadlifts to super target certain aspects you're not good at, whether you're a beginner who can't get down or an advanced powerlifter who needs to target a certain part of the lift. But I would argue, hey, do a deficit if you have the range of motion, everything's good, because you can use less weight and get a good training effect. If I'm a baseball player, why not do that? Right. Why not deadlift less and train harder? I mean, there's always ways to look at this. It's not like you can just easily say, that's stupid. Well, if it makes sense, if you can come up with a good reason why somebody needs a longer range of motion. Like for me, I got short arms. I struggle to get in a position at the beginning of a deadlift. If I can make myself get good at a little bit of a harder position, it's easier to get in a good deadlift position when I lower my feet back down. It's like the opposite of rack pull. If it's super easy to get in a position for a rack pull because the bar is high, you don't have to bend over as much, and a deadlift is a little harder still, then a deficit's even harder still. And then you can do things like a snatch grip deficit deadlift, which I do occasionally, which makes things super duper stupendously hard. And when you're a fat guy with a big belly, it's almost impossible. If you work and get good at it, then a regular deadlift, you have good form all of a sudden. It's magic. Yeah, it's magic how that works.
Yeah, with your leverages, you're stronger at the bottom. Is that correct? And you have trouble locking out?
Yeah, usually whenever the most I ever deadlifted, and I'm actually pretty proud of what I could do based on the fact that I have a really long back that's injury prone for all those bad decisions I made years ago. Short stubby arms, short stubby legs. Oh, stubby is relative.
Not designed.
I should have been a weightlifter, not a powerlifter, but that's not how my karma worked out, man. So for me, I always would pull really quick and explosively off the bottom. And then locking out with this long back would be a real chore. It'd be really hard.
Right.
So I always got faster off the bottom by doing these deficit lifts, so I could get the bar moving faster. I had a better chance of completing the lift. It always helped me a lot.
Try to outrun the part of the lift that you're not quite as strong at.
Yeah, we'll probably get into it a little later, but I'll say how I balance that lift with other kinds of deadlifts to give me my best personal chance of being a good deadlift that might help people think about how they could use some tools in their training. I'm sure we'll talk about application later. I don't want to. Look at me being all focused.
Yeah, he's like
let me tease the audience.
Staying on track with the outline.
I'm setting that up. I'm not going to go do it now. I'm going to be focused. This is the new enlightened Chris, CTP. Nod the camera to give me acknowledgement for being a smarter man.
Oh, he didn't do it.
Oh, damn.
Oy.
I won't let the trolls get me this week. No, sir.
Okay, so you mentioned that.
The whole point of a troll is that no matter what you do, they're coming after you.
Let them come for something new.
So you mentioned the deficit deadlift. We talked a little bit about Eric Cressy mentioning that in a recent article that he wrote. I would imagine, I haven't read that article, but I'm going to project a little bit that since I've read a bunch of his stuff in the past, that he's not against deficit deadlifts
and
at all.
Doug loves Eric Cressy.
I do.
He pretty much.
Eric Cressy, if you're listening, I've read your stuff for a long time, and I think
sweaty bro fest.
everything you do is great.
I remember back in the day, Doug's like, Eric this, Eric that. I'm like, just shut up about Eric Cressy already.
Eric and Doug sitting in a tree.
Yeah. Again, Eric coaches mostly baseball players, and I was a coach for the Colorado Rockies Class A advanced team in 2006. So I followed a lot of his baseball stuff, and then been reading his stuff ever since. So Eric's a smart guy. I enjoy reading his stuff. But for the most part, I'm going to assume that he's not bad mouthing the movement. He's kind of saying what you're saying. It's not a bad movement, but most people, especially new people, probably aren't doing it as well as they should, and it's not the variation for them.
Let me qualify and say, I didn't read that article. I just read the comment. I did like most idiots on the internet. I just read the comments like, okay, well, if that's the case, then I don't agree or whatever, but it's fine.
I read the abstract.
I read the abstract. It's the same as reading the paper.
Hard to read, man. It's long. It takes
too long. Did not read.
And then if I don't understand a part of it, I'll feel stupid.
I gotta think hard. I don't want to fucking think hard. I just move on with my life. Do something else.
If we were to kind of rank the difficulty of deadlifts, if you're brand new and you want to start on an easier variation, and then as you become more advanced, you start doing some of the harder variations, what variations are probably some of the easier ones you start with, and then which ones are some of the harder ones that you could get to more, down the line?
I guess the hex bar deadlift. Is that the only way that bar is called? That hex bar?
Hex bar, trap bar.
Trap bar, hex bar deadlift is probably, in my mind, it's got to be the easiest deadlift.
Oh, yeah. So, you need less range of motion at the hips. You can put some of the stress back towards your ankles. Kind of treat it almost more like a squat than a deadlift.
So the bar is a little bit. The bar is a little higher. Your feet are a little bit further, so the bar is kind of right in the middle of your body.
Yeah,
so
a lot of times
you have a favorable position to start with, easier position.
The hex bar will have a piece of the bar that pops up 2 or 3 inches taller than what the weights are at. So
you have two options usually.
It's kind of like
elevated.
It's kind of like an elevated. Yeah, it's got an elevated handle.
That's easily I think the simplest. If you struggle with the deadlift, that one will be your starting point.
Yeah, the hex bar, and then
and you can just do.
We don't have to worry about your shins at that point. You don't have to worry about whether you're going around your legs or not. With the
it'll happen automatically. You'll feel it immediately if you're too far forward or too far back. The weight will just kind of roll around as you try to pick it up. So it's a great way to teach you where to be. And I guess the next easiest version, I think, would just be an elevated deadlift, like a block pull or a rack pull, where it's a little higher, so you don't have to work so hard to get in a position. You just gotta have somebody watch you because it's easy to do too much weight, I guess, and start making mistakes.
Yeah, that's certainly true. That's the balance for the rack pulls with new people, is that if you start someone above the knee, for example, where the bar is starting above the knee and not mid shin, they can pull more weight, but they're still new, so you don't want them to be pulling like a super max deadlift where they're pulling 130% of what they actually really could deadlift from the floor.
That was one of the main lessons I learned in powerlifting. Is everybody thinks that. And some people do this because they do believe in it, but if you can really overload, like I know guys who are 800-pound deadlifters, guys I used to roll with. That sounds cool, right? Guys I used to roll with back in the day. They would do like 800-pound deadlifts on the ground, but they could do rack pulls like 1,100 pounds.
Yeah.
And they would just overload their lifts so much, their spine will be so stressed by that, they just said, well, look, dude, if I can do that, I just don't fear an 800-pound deadlift attempt in the meet. I go, well, you're definitely right. But I'd say for most people,
it's an advanced lifter.
For most people, you need to think about what position would you be in if you had pulled it off the ground and now found yourself in this rack pull position. So it's going to be a little, shoulders maybe a little bit more over the bar. You're not going to be wedging yourself underneath and trying to lift the most possible weight from the top of your thigh, because that won't really help you, because you won't be looking like that. Yeah, in a regular deadlift or a regular clean pull or snatch pull.
That's something a lot of people don't understand.
That's the thing to think
Same
about.
thing with the pulls off the blocks too. Is people make the mistake of setting up in a different position than what you're going to be in, as if you had pulled it off the floor.
If your job is
very common mistake.
If you want to be a strong man and you're going to compete in that movement, a partial deadlift for max weight, learn how to do the max weight. But if you're trying to become overall better at pulling, then you got to think, how can I use this to make me better? Not test myself on this, not manipulate this to do the most weight because my ego needs the satisfaction.
In the pulls, if you're trying to do the overload thing, you're trying to maximize and optimize your pull from the floor. And if you don't have the range of motion already set in from the floor, you probably have no business in the overload scenario.
Yeah.
So, range of motion first, and then start playing around with maybe some of these overload principles.
Sounds very wise to me, Mike.
That's why I'm here.
So you got hex bar deadlifts or trap bar deadlifts, and then rack pulls would be probably number 2, or maybe we put them in the same
they could be
category.
very hard, but in terms of technical need, they're pretty similar. I mean, you don't have to work so hard to be in good position.
I'd probably put sumo deadlifts as the next variation in that progression, where sumo deadlifts are easier to get into a good position compared to a regular from the floor, traditional style deadlift where your feet are on the inside and your hands are on the outside. A sumo deadlift, if you've never done one before, your feet are wide and your hands are inside your feet, so your arms are hanging right between your knees, basically. So you have a wider stance deadlift.
I had a novel thought. Do you think that is? It's a very comfortable position to be in for a lot of people. I guess that's why you see a lot of people. I won't name names. I'm not going to name names on this show, but a lot of people like to do cleans where they jump those fucking feet out to sumo position to catch instead of just bending their knees to get down. I wonder if there's any sort of tie into that. I have no idea, but there could be.
Yeah, I think there's more of a motor. It's a motor pattern. Yeah, I'm gonna have to let the thought finish itself in my mind first.
The neotropics have to do their work first.
Yeah, I think when people aren't actually very comfortable at front squatting if they're having a hard time catching a clean. They actually probably aren't very good at getting under the bar. They're probably not finishing the pull. There's too many other variables there.
We won't go down that rabbit hole.
Sorry, I started trying to go down a rabbit hole, and I realized that we should fucking just get out of it.
Let's get out of the rabbit hole. So we'll make this point. If we could make one point right now, I'd say
that was your fault, by the way.
Don't you point fingers at me, jerk face. I'd say that the point I would make is that before you get too caught up on reaching for the load, and like, I need to be able to pull that. Trust me, if you spend the time it takes to make sure your mechanics are what they should be, not perfect, but what they should be now. Let's say about a front squat and a clean and deadlift. If you want a future in that exercise and you're starting now, learn it the right way now. Don't start chasing load and make it impossible to learn the form later, because you're going to cement something in the place that can't be corrected, and you're going to fuck yourself in the future. Take your time to learn it, really. Like what I've spent the last year of my life doing that set me up for a new wave of PRs now. Go back and make sure your posture is as good as it can be.
By the way,
and then start loading the bar again.
I just want to bring this up because it crossed my mind. All these people that talk about training their posterior chain and I need a low bar box squat.
I don't
to
even
train
talk
posterior.
that. I don't talk that anymore.
I'm like, look,
it's too much. Too many words.
We're gonna list off like 10 exercises that are great for posterior chain, so don't worry about it.
You don't have to. It's like primal.
We just solved your problem with this episode. I promise.
Let me tell you this. If you use the words primal, paleo, posterior chain, I don't know, it's a lot of P's. Sorry. If you say things like swag, I hate you. I hate you. Stop it. It's just, we don't need all these stupid words for these things we're saying.
Chris says these things and then he uses the words himself, or I'll use them and then he claims that he loves me.
I love you despite your faults. Despite your faults, because you have that great beard and your kind soul. So I'll tolerate some buzzwords from you, but we don't need these things.
Oh, I don't know if we should talk about that.
That's right. You might be getting rid of his beard.
No, we're not talking about that.
CTP is about to post a video about that.
Is there? So should we say next after that, Doug, I guess would be a regular deadlift after sumo deadlifts as being the next hardest thing?
Yeah, I go along with that. A regular deadlift is a pretty middle of the road deadlift variation for people to do.
Now here's where it gets fun. How do you get things hard? What's your next hardest thing after just regular deadlift?
After regular deadlift, either I would probably go with a snatch grip before I'd go with a deficit pull, and then snatch grip deficit pulls would probably be the hardest variation. And I would say, I'll make the inception loop one hole deeper. I'd say my new favorite exercise is snatch grip, sometimes deficit, stiff-legged.
deadlifts, which I really enjoy. But you got to have some time to get used to that because you'll rip your hamstring right off your ass.
It's a small percentage of the population that's
you were
going to do that
mentioning
correctly.
that, and then Doug was
like
saying
it.
in the kitchen, like,
So
we
that
need to remind
movement-
people you've been powerlifting for
So I guess
forever
or weightlifting. Yeah, you have to be strong to where you know what you're doing. So don't do this as a beginner. But I really like them. Famously, I guess Dmitry Klokov has made them pretty well known because this cat. If you don't know who that is, just type in Klokov on YouTube and spend your Sunday afternoon watching really awesome, fun Russian videos, like one where he's doing a 230 pound or 230 kilo power clean as some guy plays a what's this instrument? You do this accordion. Some guy's playing Russian music on the accordion. It's great stuff. But he does
polka and weightlifting.
He's got one video where he does like a 250 kilo snatch grip, so hands wide, stiff leg, so knees straight, deadlift like 5 reps, like 550 pounds with that.
This dude is not training for health either. Keep that in mind.
He's trained to be as strong as he can be, which he's close to that.
If you watch that video, he's round. His back is round in the video, and kind of like Mike was just saying about the conversation we're having in the kitchen.
It has been a little bit round.
Yeah, when you do a snatch grip deficit straight leg deadlift pull, you've been powerlifting for 25 years. you know what kind of round is, especially if it's round with your thoracic spine, your upper back, as opposed to your lower back, and you know what a little bit round but safe is versus like disc blowingly round and unsafe. So if you're brand new, if you've been lifting for less than 5 years, you probably shouldn't do any pulls where you're round upper or lower back at all. Just stick with basics. You can still get plenty strong having a straight back doing regular deadlifts. You don't need to do all these weird, crazy variations that you see, one of the best weightlifters, Klokov, in the world doing. So
don't fall into the trap.
Do the basics.
And we did it careful. This is the hardest version of this thing you can do.
Yeah.
Be cool.
All right, we're going to take a break real quick. When we come back, we're going to talk about exactly how you can improve your deadlift. And then I actually want to touch on Olympic lifts, deadlifting in regard to weightlifting. So we'll touch on that as well.
We'll touch it.
And the technique WOD you're about to watch is going to be phenomenal. I know that.
So much technique. I mean, of how to do things.
Do we have a technique WOD? Welcome back to Technique WOD. My name is Doug Larson with the Barbell Shrugged Podcast. You can go to barbellshrugged.com to check out the podcast and the rest of the Technique WOD episodes. Today we're going to talk about deadlifts and all the different variations of deadlifts that you can do, the benefits of each, and techniques for all of it. So first, let's go over a regular deadlift and talk about technique points both from the front and from the side. So whenever you're coaching or videoing yourself, from the front and from the side, those are the best positions where you're going to get a good angle where you can really see if you're doing it correctly. If you're a little more experienced, getting this kind of angled view right now, the same view that you're looking at through the camera right now, can be beneficial, but if you're really wanting to check out someone's knee position or someone's back position, being right on the front or right on the side is ideal. So go ahead and come right to the front right now, Chris. So from the front, technique-wise, I like to have my feet about hip width apart, where my legs are 100% totally vertical, and then maybe widen up a little bit. So it's not really hip width, not really shoulder width. It's kind of in between hip and shoulder width apart. That's where it's comfortable for me, and my feet, for the most part, are almost all the way straight ahead. As I go down, my knees go out, my back stays straight, and I'm going to grab right outside of my shins, shoulders back. I'm going to keep my knees out as I squeeze my butt and pull the weight from the floor. As I pass the knee, I'll bring my hips forward. So really the benefit from the front
is mostly knee position and foot position. I can see if I'm like this, if my arms are too close together, which is a common problem. For me, with my leverages, I walk up all the way to the bar where there's no space here. Walk up all the way to the bar. I keep that vertical shin, butt back, and then I bend my knees. Shoulders together. I drive through the floor until I pass my knee, and now my hips come forward and my shoulders go back. From the side. From the side again, you see I walk all the way up to the bar. I keep a neutral spine, ribs down. I bend at the hip. Again, as far as I can with a neutral spine, and then I can start bending my knee. And then I can start bending my knee until I get to the bar. Shoulders back. I keep that vertical shin. I drive through the floor. Then once I pass the knee, my hips come forward. I squeeze my butt and I pull my shoulders back. I'm not leaning back. I'm squeezing my butt and I'm standing as tall as I can. What's really common is that people finish like this with their shoulders forward, or they don't squeeze their butt and they end up like this. Okay, where they're hyperextending their low back and their knees are locked. You don't want your knees to be locked. You can have a soft knee, which means a straight knee, but it's not locked. And then you squeeze your butt and that pulls you out of that hyperextended position. Okay? So, in case the bumper plate was in the way, I don't want my knee to be locked and me to be hyperextended like this. I want to have a straight knee, my butt squeezed, and I'm just standing as tall as I can with my shoulders back. Okay? So that's basic points on how to deadlift. There's many different types of deadlifts. A lot of people don't have the mobility to do a regular deadlift with a straight bar off the floor. So there's a bunch of other options that we have. So probably my favorite option for brand new people is to teach them how to do a hex bar or a trap bar deadlift. This is a hex bar. You stand inside of it. That way the bar, isn't running into your shins. You don't have to account for the bar path, okay? Which means it'll be kind of in between a squat and a deadlift. It's the same thing. I bend over as far as I can with a straight back. Then I can bend my knees. And in this case, I can have a little more of a forward shin angle because the bar is not running into my shin. So it can be in between a squat and a deadlift. It looks like this. So that's a hex bar deadlift. Same rules apply. Same rules apply if you watch from the front. Same rules apply if you watch from the front. My feet are pretty much straight ahead. I stand right in the middle. Knees go out. Shoulders back. Just like this. So that's a hex bar deadlift. You can see the handles are a little bit higher. So I'm not all the way down, so to speak, like I would be with a regular bar. I can start a little bit higher, which means I don't have to have as much mobility. If I get a little more mobility, I can just flip it over and I can grab the other handles. I can grab the other handles, and now I have to squat a little bit lower. Again, it's kind of in between a squat and a deadlift. A little more quad, a little less hips, glutes and hamstrings, if you will, because you'll be a little more vertical with your torso, not quite so bent over. So that's where I like to start. From there, I like to progress. Again, that's where I like to start with new people or people that don't have very much mobility and been doing deadlifts incorrectly for trying to relearn. So from there, I like to either go to one of two things. I like to go to a rack pull, or I like to go to a sumo deadlift. We're gonna go over each one right now. Might be easier for you to come out here and film me from the front. So using these hooks that you can buy at Rogue, you can elevate the bar to whatever height you want. So instead of the bar starting mid-shin, it can start, in this case, just below my knee. I don't need as much mobility to get into a good position. So I can come up to the bar, again, I can push my butt back, grab right outside my legs, and then I can just squeeze and come up right from there. I'm doing a rack pull is what I'm doing. I'm basically just doing a rack pull, and the reason I'm doing it in this case isn't necessarily to load up 130% of my deadlift max. What I'm doing here is I'm showing you a scaled deadlift for people that don't have adequate mobility to keep a neutral spine. So if you see someone go down to get a bar and they go, and they're about right here, you don't want to deadlift that person from the floor, especially in a Metcon when they're fatigued and they're tired. Maybe you can get them into a position where they're really straining, where it doesn't look horrible, it looks maybe okay. Once that person gets tired, their back's going to round, and eventually they're going to hurt their back. Even if it's not that day, it'll happen eventually. Stress is cumulative. He can put the stress on his back that day, and then hurt his back getting in and out of his car, a week from now. So you don't want to put that person in that position. What you want to do is test them. You can put your hand on their back or have them put their hand on their back, and then they can go down, bending at the hip first, and then go and reach for the bar. And if they start to round right here, well, that's as high as they want to go. That means the bar is going to be about right here. That's maybe 4 or 5 inches above where the bar is off the ground. So you can put them on an elevated platform and they can pull a deadlift safely. They'll get stronger. They'll have almost the same amount of strength benefit, but they won't have nearly as much risk because they're not rounding their back. So a rack pull is a great option. And again, you can start them above the knee if you want and then move them down. As they gain more mobility, either in their ankles or hips or thoracic spine or wherever they need more mobility, and that's a whole different issue, testing where you need mobility. But you can start high and then you can work your way lower and lower and lower until you're eventually on the ground. Okay? The other option is to do a sumo deadlift. So a sumo deadlift is where I have wide feet and my hands are on the inside of my feet. My feet are, for the most part, pretty straight ahead. I like to toe out about 10 degrees. Same thing. I'm going to have my knees go out, back stay straight. It looks just like this. So what you'll find is that people that can't keep a neutral spine on a regular deadlift tend to do better on a sumo deadlift. So if I look like this, if I go down and I end up like this, maybe on a sumo deadlift, I go down and I'm a little bit better. I didn't gain any mobility. It just put me in a position that was easier to achieve, and now I can pull a deadlift a little more safely. I'm not quite as bent over. I'm a little more vertical with my torso. If you look at studies on deadlifts and shear forces on your spine, hex bar deadlifts tend to have the least amount of shear force on your low back, and then sumos and then regular conventional deadlifts have the most shear force. Doesn't mean they're not safe at all. It means that you want to pick the variation that's right for you with your level of experience and your level of mobility. You always want to do it correctly. So, from the side, the sumo deadlift looks just like this. Again, wide feet, knees out. I keep my back flat until I can't bend over at the hip any further, and then I can start bending my knees. As I bend my knees, I push them out. My back angle stays the same. Once I pass the knee, my hips come forward, my shoulders go back. I stand as tall as I can. And then on the way down, I bend at the hip until I pass my knee, and then I bend my knees. My knees go out. I go up and down the exact same way. If I pull from the floor in a perfect position, I go down in that same perfect position. So a sumo deadlift is a good variation. From there, kind of a middle of the road, well, I'll keep here. A middle of the road variation is just a regular deadlift. So the same deadlift I showed at the very beginning, feet hip width apart, bending at the hip, then I bend my knees. If I want, I can alternate my grip. If it's heavy, keep that vertical shin as long as I can, butt down. Once I pass the knee, hips come forward, shoulders go back. Bend at the hip, pass the knee, and then I can bend my knees. Or if it's really heavy, you can just drop it. So that's really kind of a middle of the road variation. From there, you have a bunch of other options. Generally, more mobility and lower bar positions are harder to achieve. I forgot what I just said. Things that require more mobility. And generally, those positions that require more mobility are positions where you're pulling from lower on your body, where you're either doing something like a snatch grip deadlift, where I might be here and I'm going to grab wide like I would on my snatch. So I bend at the hip and I keep going lower and lower and lower, and I'm grabbing wide, okay, just like I would on a snatch. And so my hips can be a little higher because I'm just doing a deadlift. I press, and then when I pass my hips, I stand all the way up, bend at the hip, and then bend my knees. From the front looks the exact same way. Knees out. Okay. My hips are a little bit above my knees, so I'm not in a snatch position specifically. I'm in a deadlift position just with a wide grip. Drive my heels through the floor. Once I pass my knee, squeeze my butt, pull my shoulders back, and I stand up normal. So a snatch grip deadlift is slightly different than a snatch deadlift. The difference is that I'm doing a deadlift with a snatch grip, as opposed to doing a snatch, first pull, and transition with a very heavy weight. So, to see what that looks like, a snatch grip deadlift looks like this. I'm deadlifting with a wide grip. My hips are high. I'm bent over. I drive, and then I just stand up normal and squeeze my butt. Whereas a snatch deadlift, if you're a weightlifter, my feet might be a little wider. I'm pushing my knees out. My butt is lower. And then I'm doing a first pull where I'm here. And then I'm transitioning or I'm pushing my knees under the bar. It's connecting with my hips. From this point, I would usually try to extend, shrug, and catch the weight overhead. Okay? So I'm putting myself in a position, in that power position right here, where I can now jump and shrug and catch the weight over my head. So a snatch grip deadlift is a deadlift. Snatch deadlift is an Olympic movement where you're mimicking the snatch, but you're kind of just stopping halfway once you've transitioned and you're in that power position. Okay. So you can see, having that wider grip requires me to get lower. I need more mobility. A lot of people can't get into a good position. You tell them to do a snatch grip deadlift, and they go like this. They get here, and then you see they're like this, and they can't get into a good position. So that's not a good variation for a lot of people, just because they just don't have the mobility for it. Can't get into a good position. So that's why it's one of the harder variations. Another one of the harder variations is simply to elevate your feet. This is called a deficit deadlift. So you can see the bar, instead of standing right here, is starting lower on my body. Again, the lower I go, the more likely it is that I'm not going to be able to keep a neutral spine. So I bend at the hip, and then I start bending my knees. My butt goes lower. I grab right outside my shins, knees out, and then I do a deadlift from here. I pass the knee, hips come forward, and I lock out at the very top, shoulders back, butt squeeze. Same thing on the way down. I bend at the hip, and then I can bend the knees. So you can see, it's harder to get so low and keep a neutral spine. I might just be starting to round right now. Butt up, back flat, keep that angle until you pass the knee, hips come forward, shoulders go back, stand tall. So a deficit deadlift is definitely one of the harder variations, probably the hardest variation, as Chris Moore mentioned in the podcast. Getting a little lightheaded. As Chris Moore mentioned in the podcast, is a deficit deadlift with a wide grip. I'm doing a deficit snatch grip deadlift. So I'm here, I'm bending at the hip, bending my knees, grabbing as wide as I can. For me, this is probably way too low. So I'm here. My hips are super low because I can't keep a neutral spine otherwise. I come here, I deadlift all the way to the top. For me, my normal compensation when I get too low isn't that I round my back, it's that I usually destabilize my shoulders, my scapula rolls forward, and I get out of position with my shoulders, especially on heavy things like rack pulls. You know, a rack pull above the knee for a guy with my leverages where I'm way stronger at the top, I could probably do 200 pounds over my max. So if I pull 600 for a set of 3 on rack pulls, my compensation isn't necessarily to round my back, it's that my shoulders will come forward and I'll pull like this. I used to do that a lot when I was younger, when I thought rack pulls were really cool, even though they never really seemed to improve my actual deadlift 1 rep max, because the top of the move is never really where I needed a lot of help. So anyway. I'm sorry?
Stiff leg deadlifts?
Yeah, we can talk about that too. A stiff leg deadlift is what Chris was just mentioning. A stiff leg deadlift or an RDL is a great variation, especially if you're a person that does have a range of motion problem and you don't like pulling from the floor. What you can do instead is start the bar What you can do instead is start the bar on an elevated surface. You can start the bar somewhere higher, and then you can do an RDL. So it looks like this. I can do a deadlift from a safe position here, take a step back, and then I can bend at the hip, get a big stretch in my hamstrings, and then come back up. So my knee angle isn't changing. So my knee angle's not changing at all. It's all hips, getting a big stretch in my hamstrings, squeezing my glutes, and driving through the floor, all hips, and no knee extension at all. So your quads are more or less taken out of it, and a great movement, especially if you're a person that has, like a sprained ankle or something. If you can't bend your ankle, for front squats or whatnot, you can pull from a high position like this, and then you can RDL, and your ankle doesn't really move that much. If you can support a load, but you can't bend it, it's a good way to still get a good amount of strength training, keep your hips strong while you're rehabbing your ankle. We do that all the time here at Faction. So,
mention to them that RDL stands for Romanian deadlift and it's the same as a stiff leg.
That's a very good point. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. A stiff leg deadlift is the same as an RDL. An RDL stands for Romanian deadlift. Sometimes people use them interchangeably. Sometimes they mean stiff leg deadlift. They mean you're going to round your back during the movement like this, which is probably never a good idea, so don't do that ever. If you have a hurt back, deadlifts are not the end-all be-all of strength training. They're a beneficial movement, but if you already have a hurt back, it's okay to, for a while, get away from deadlifts, do more single leg work, do more vertical type bilateral squatting, front squats, back squats, and overhead squats, especially Olympic style where you're more upright and you're not so bent over. Let your back heal up. Once it's 100% healed, then you can start progressing back into deadlifts using the progression we talked about earlier, probably starting with something like a trap bar with less shear force, and then moving on to a sumo deadlift, and then onto a regular deadlift, and then eventually maybe to heavier pulls, like heavy rack pulls, and what have you. So, wrap it up for today. If you have more questions about deadlifting, always you can go to barbellshrugged.com and click the Ask a Question tab at the top of the page, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter, and we can answer your question another day.
You're definitely gonna have to edit that.
No.
All right, welcome back to Barbell Shrugged, the deadlift edition.
That sounds hardcore, man.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was thinking about TV and how all those news anchors, they get real into it.
You just titillated me.
Yeah. All right, first I want to throw something out there real quick for everybody. We're talking about deadlifts in regard to getting better at deadlifting and CrossFit and stuff like that. But I want to talk a little bit about Olympic weightlifting. And if at any time you're wanting to get better at weightlifting, doing a lot of the deadlift stuff we're talking about now may not be beneficial. I actually advise a lot of people who are CrossFitters who want to spend a period of time getting better at their weightlifting technique to take a break from doing any deadlifting at all. You may do some clean variation of the deadlift or a snatch deadlift where you are practicing the bar path at a submaximal
There
load.
you go, coach.
Yeah. So you're not going to be going really heavy. You're going to be going off a percentage. This is why a lot of times if you look at a weightlifting program and snatch pulls, snatch deadlifts, clean deadlifts, they're being prescribed at a percentage of your clean or your snatch because you want to be able to practice proper bar path, and that's what it's all about. So,
you're suggesting that the deadlift is not the same as a clean or a snatch, right?
that is correct.
Okay.
A clean, and we have a technique WOD on this.
By the way, I agree with you.
I know. There's a technique WOD on this, and we talk about how a clean is not a deadlift where you jump at the end. All right. So I know a lot of people tend to teach it that way for some reason, but it's not the case. So if you ever want to actually get good at the Olympic lifts, you should probably take a break from deadlifting for a while and work on your weightlifting technique. And part of that is leaving out the traditional deadlift and maybe doing some snatch deadlift or clean deadlift work.
Don't be the guy who goes, if I deadlift more, I'll clean more, because that shit ain't true. I'll show you 8,000, 100 million versions of somebody who tried to get better at deadlifting through like powerlifting means, and it didn't affect their clean.
Well, that'll be true if you're really bad at it. So it all depends. You talk a lot about low-hanging fruit, Chris.
Really bad at what?
I do. My fruit hangs low.
At cleans? What are you talking about?
Anything. Well, if you're bad at deadlifting or if you're bad at cleans, like if one of those go up, the other one's gonna probably go up as well. Like say you're only deadlifting 300 pounds and you can clean, say 200 or 150 pounds.
Yes.
Well, if your deadlift goes up to 400, you probably can do a shitty power clean.
That's a
with
very
more
short.
weight.
That's a very short window.
Exactly.
That will happen.
So I wouldn't say it would never happen, but if you're looking to raise your potential for weightlifting down the road, then
How about this, coach? How about this, coach? Don't assume it'll happen, because it probably won't.
I go along with that. For me, actually, if I increase my max strength, if my back squat or my deadlift goes up, my cleans and my snatches go up too.
That's a good.
Like my technique hasn't changed in almost a decade.
I was gonna say your technique is sound on snatch and
if I just get stronger, it all goes up.
See, that's different. Getting stronger in squats is a different thing.
If you're a fantastic weightlifter and you get stronger, your lifts will go up.
Yeah.
If you're not a fantastic weightlifter and you get stronger, your lifts will just still be.
I guess that's an interesting. Well, I won't go too far in that, but that's an interesting thing. Is the squat is just fundamental, inherent extending of your body, which you're going to do under all circumstances. The deadlift is mechanically not like a clean or a snatch. So getting really good at the squat is just a different thing. The squat is tied into everything. It's very zen. You cannot separate the squat from other things you want to get good at.
Yeah, and that's why you can go a period of time without deadlifting and probably squat and
that's
not hurt your fitness.
If we're talking about limitations of these strength exercises, the deadlift is good in that you just pick the bar off the ground, and the squat is tough because are you going to hit a certain depth? Where do you put the bar? What kind of bar do you use? Do you use wraps or belt or not? So it's hard to make it a relative comparison. You got to do it the same way if you want to know if you are getting stronger. But the flip side is the inherent physiological stimulus of the squat makes you better. It's across the board. That's why everybody, football players, weightlifters, powerlifters, should be doing this a lot of squatting. But yeah, the deadlift is a squarely different animal.
Let's talk about something a little more tangible for a minute.
That was my brainstorm
kind of
moment.
philosophical there, like a bunch of nonsensical meaningless to a lot of people.
One more thing before we.
I love being nonsensical.
One more thing before we get back on track, and that is with the weightlifting programming I do. Our weightlifters, I won't say they never, ever, ever, but 99% of the time they're not going to pull a deadlift. They'll do a clean deadlift, snatch deadlift, some variation of a snatch or clean. Even if it is over 100%, we're working with percentages. Sometimes I say, hey, just go heavy. We're not working off percentages of your clean. I just want to make sure there's no technique breakdown. Yeah. So I'm just going to say that, and now we can move on.
Okay.
It's a good point. It's a good point to make, Mike. You didn't go off the tangent.
Yeah.
All right, so volume-wise, how much volume should you be doing of a regular deadlift? And it's going to vary depending on your training age. So if you're a beginner versus an advanced athlete, like if you deadlift 350 versus you deadlift 750, like how much volume can you be doing on a deadlift? I'm gonna pose that to you, Mr. Moore.
Well, I think the thing that separates a beginner from an advanced athlete, in my mind, always is that when you're beginning, you're so under your potential that you can't really make yourself too beat up. So if you deadlift 300 pounds, it's a great start. You're not weak. You're just where you are. But if you could say, if within you there's a potential to deadlift 500 and now you can only do 300, you can do more work now because you're not in a position where you can make yourself very tired. You're not strong enough to hurt yourself yet. So I think you can do nice progressive weekly doses of like 3 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 5 in the deadlift once a week. I think you'd be fine. But quickly, as you start getting to where your real potential is, as you get to 400, and then as you get near 5, the deadlift becomes I always think of the deadlift like my checking account or like a credit card, where if I do it heavy, I got to pay back the recovery debt before I do it again. And that means any form of it. Because if I deadlift now, like my best deadlift is not astronomically good compared to the weightlifters, but it's near my physiological peak. So I do it heavy for like 1 set of 3 heavy like once a month instead of doing it weekly. So I think if you've been CrossFitting heavy and your deadlift is moving slow and steady, you're probably in the realm of like 1 good set of 5 heavy in the deadlift, maybe once a week might be all you could possibly need for a regular deadlift. That's sort of my highest level thought about what it is.
Yeah, so if you're brand new, once or twice a week is fine. But if you are more advanced, maybe every 2 weeks, maybe every 3 weeks, you're going to have to do it much, much less.
Very quickly, it could be like once a month, one heavy set of 5 could be all you really need for the deadlift.
I think too, though, like, and this is just a theory of mine, since I don't really train powerlifters. I'm training weightlifters, so I'm not exactly asking them to pull real heavy real frequently, but
I'm thinking about just strength in general as well. I'm not thinking about power.
Right, so that's why I'm saying this is more of a theory for me. I haven't seen this in practice a whole lot, but I've talked to some powerlifters who they're better deadlifters than they are squatters, so they're built to deadlift, right?
Yeah.
And it
Those are
sounds
the
like
same guys who are like, the meat doesn't start till the bar hits the floor. That's because you're good at deadlifting, asshole. If you had a long back, you would say, oh, the squat's where it's at.
right. That's exactly right.
That's what everybody does.
But the guy that struggles with the deadlift, do you think maybe he shouldn't be deadlifting as frequently because it's going to beat him up? And the guy that is built leverage wise to deadlift more frequently and stuff like that, do you think that he can maybe almost deadlift like other people squat and not take, and the volume can change based on leverages?
I think if you're naturally good at the deadlift, you can definitely get away with doing it more because you've probably got longer arms and your back is not as compromised. You don't get as beat up by it. Mm-hmm. You're just more suited to it. You can do it more often, and there's no way to know how often is too often for you. But if you can do it weekly and you're making progress, then it's not too often for you.
Yeah, as a general rule, the movements that fit your body type, in my opinion, you can do more frequently without getting beat up.
Yeah, so for me, it's like I could do heavy good mornings a lot. Like, that doesn't hurt me at all. I can do. I'll go ahead and go into my main point about the deadlift. What I always think about the deadlift, because I'm a guy who can't do the deadlift often, not standard heavy for sets of 5. It just, every time I've ever tried to do that over the course of like a 20-year career, I guess spent since my football injury, 15 good years, where the only thing that's ever worked for me is keeping balance in mind. So in my approach, I work off basically like a 3 to 4 week block. I'm thinking in terms of tiny little packages of like 4 weeks. And I'm always thinking of balance. Like this week I did a deficit deadlift. We talked about that earlier. It's a lift that makes it really hard at the bottom. I got to fight to arch. I got to fight to get into position. I'm using less weight, which is a good thing, but it makes me better at moving the bar off the ground to the middle. Mm-hmm. So the way I do balance is I wouldn't do that again next week. Not even for speed. Because I fatigued myself. I made it hard in that position, so I've got that debt in mind. The next week, I'll do speed pulls again, but I will do it the flip side. I'll work a rack position. I'll move the bar up to just under my knee, which for me is not really that strong either, but then I'll work that. And then on a wider scale, I'll pull back. I'll go, okay, the next time I do deficit deadlifts, I'll do them heavy. And then the next time I do rack pulls, I'll do them heavy. So I'm alternating between low and high, and I'm alternating between heavy and light. So I don't overdo any one thing over the course of that month. That's the kind of way I approach it, being a guy who's got a long back with a history of lower back trouble, that I know I can't deadlift a lot. So if I do those things for the deadlift, and I do a lot of squatting, I've got a very potent formula for making sure my deadlift ability is where it needs to be.
What do you think about people who are also throwing deadlifting in their Metcons? So they're doing a lot of Metconning, and they may have, say they're 1 rep max on a deadlift, maybe 400 pounds, but now they're doing a conditioning session where they're deadlifting 275 for a total of 40 reps.
I think the biggest easy mistake to make for CrossFitters, especially when they start thinking about, I got to get stronger, which they should be thinking about that. We all agree on that. But they tend to think, okay, what can I do for strength work? I'll do 5-3-1, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do some West Side stuff. All fine. But the real risk is that you have this plan for strength, and then whoever's doing your WOD programming with your conditioning program is not thinking about what you're doing for your strength work. So it might be those times somebody's like, here's your deadlift day. Oh, and we're going to do a deadlift WOD where we do this slow, 315 for 3 sets of 10. That's obviously a bad combo because it's just too much of one thing in one WOD. Or the risk is you do today, somebody goes, oh, we got a WOD on the board. It's sumo deadlift high pulls, or it's deficit deadlifts, or it's just regular deadlifts for 3 sets of 10 or 5 sets of whatever, AMRAP, whatever the fuck you want to dream up in your mind. But then it's like, well, my strength work that's independent programs later in the week a heavy deadlift. I think all those things are mistakes. If you do a WOD with a deadlift, then I think it needs to be next week at the earliest before you do any other kind of deadlift, period. Unless it's a light RDL or it's a clean deadlift at a very light percentage.
Submaximal
You got to
loads
remember
for-
that because you did a lot of weights in something does not mean that was quote unquote light. That's the biggest mistake people make. You did a huge amount of work in that. You can't do it heavy the same week. You're going to run into trouble really quick. That would be my red flag I'm waving in front. Don't do that shit.
One of the things I do is stop for CrossFitters, and this may be, some coaches might think this is weird, but I stop programming like RDLs into the weightlifting side of like the CrossFit portion, because when I watch people doing deadlifts in a Metcon, it almost always turns into an RDL, right? Dude, seriously.
So why you don't need to train that anymore?
So I was like, I didn't do very many RDLs when I was weightlifting. I started CrossFitting, and I was doing a lot of deadlifts. I was like, well, you're basically asking these people to do speed RDLs.
It's a lazier position to be in, right? It's easier to.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it's not better or more efficient or anything like that. It's just where people go. Mm-hmm. So it's like one day I was looking across the gym and I was like,
you preserve those quads.
I'm
who are
like,
starting to smoke.
Everyone's doing speed RDLs.
Wow, cool.
If I don't need to program these extra.
So they're supposed to be doing good quality deadlifts, but they're in a Metcon. They're trying to go fast, and what they end up doing, just to elaborate on what Mike's saying, is they end up doing a Romanian deadlift where you keep your knees basically more or less locked out, and then you're just hinging at the hip, bouncing the weight off the floor.
So I'm watching this, and I could either A,
bad technique,
go and try and fix everybody in the world, or B, just know that it's going to be an RDL for most people. And I'm not talking about in my gym. Like if I'm programming for someone who's not even in the facility, so I don't have eyes on them all the time. I don't assume that they're doing RDLs all the time, but I do keep that in mind. That could potentially, more than likely, that's really happening.
Yeah,
so that's something that kind of like a light bulb that went off in my head at one point.
Yeah, do a proper deadlift if you want to do a proper deadlift in your WOD. There's nothing wrong. Like they did in the CrossFit Games. They had that heavy deadlift WOD at the end that was pretty gnarly.
And might I add, you're not gonna watching the CrossFit Games. These guys aren't doing the RDL.
No, they're doing good deadlifts.
They're doing good deadlifts.
Good heavy deadlifts, and you can do it. It's fine. Just balance it out. So don't try to then program strength deadlifts in that week or even the week after that. Do that heavy thing on your WOD once a month. Give yourself some time to recover. You'll know. You might be able to tell the next time you do like an Olympic pull. If you feel a little beat up and slow on your Olympic style pulls, then you know that your back paid a little price for that. You're going to feel not so fresh. When you do feel fresh on Olympic style pull, then you go, maybe I can do a deadlift if that's important to me. But on the other side, you can do them all the time if you keep your deadlift style WOD like a assistance exercise. You can do like, if you're doing things like RDLs, you can do that. It's fine. It's lighter weight. You won't get so tired. You can do kettlebell swings. There's other things that work better for WODs sometimes. That kind of shit. That's what kettlebells are for. Not for replacing barbells, but for supplementing everything else.
Right, I completely agree. For general fitness clients, if you're just the average CrossFitter, you're not trying to go to regionals, you're not trying to go to the games, you probably don't need to deadlift in your Metcons very often. Once in a while might be okay, but for the most part, do deadlifts in the strength session, do kettlebell swings and other more conservative things in your Metcon. You'll still get in shape, you'll still get stronger, you'll still make great changes in your body composition, you lose fat, you'll gain muscle, the whole deal. But it's just not something that you need to do to make those changes. You don't need to deadlift in your Metcons.
Non-overlapping magisteria for the Stephen J. Gould fans, which I'm sure there'll be none listening to this.
I'm not one of them.
Since I don't know what you're talking about, I'm going to
Google
assume
that.
there's not many.
That's right.
Yeah, these two things are awesome on their own. You don't have to overlap and mix them. They can stand side by side and work great.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's bad if you do. It just
you don't have
for
to.
some people.
Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it.
Right.
There's some cases where it's okay. There's some cases where it probably should never be done. But in general, if you're competing and you have to do that in competition, you need to get used to it at some point. You need to work on your touch and go deadlifts as an example. But for the most part, you're setting yourself up for the potential of an injury if you are brand new and you're trying to Metcon with deadlifts. It doesn't always happen, but it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Last thing is, what if you can't hold on to the bar? A lot of people have trouble holding on to a heavy deadlift. Like what kind of options do you have for either changing the bar type or using straps or alternating your grip? Like what do you usually do when you're doing heavy deads?
Yeah, I think if you don't want to, I guess, use straps all the time in a heavy deadlift because you do need to train your hands at some point. And you could also use, you can do deadlifts with a hook grip, which hurts, but I do that occasionally. It helps the grip issue. Mm-hmm. Commonly what people will do is just turn one hand over, one hand under, which is a classic deadlift grip. Mm-hmm. Even sometimes with that approach, your grip can fail. I'd say probably for most CrossFitters, that grip probably won't fail because you're not likely going to outpull your hand stand. I think most fit, strong CrossFitters, or people who are just emerging and getting better at it, you're not deadlifting so much where your hand can't hold on to it. I know a lot of powerlifters who can't hold on like 850-pound deadlifts, but that's another thing.
Yeah.
And that's when you need to think about doing specific hand exercise that can help you keep your grip closed. But I'd say for most people, turning that one hand over, I wouldn't anticipate many grip problems with the pull.
Just one thing on that is make sure that you alternate a little bit. Just you don't want to develop some asymmetries.
That's why unless I'm going
sometimes do it like this and then sometimes switch and do it like that.
Yeah, like I left hand up, right hand down, and then go back, and switch it up. What I do is I switch it up a lot when I'm warming up, and then when I'm in the heat of the moment, I usually go with what's most comfortable for me, which is like right hand over, right hand up, left hand under.
After my like decade of really intense powerlifting training, I couldn't, like right now, I can't take my right arm, which is the hand I grab over, like a regular grip on the deadlift. I can't turn that under and hold the deadlift. Right. So that's the kind of stuff you will get if you don't keep balance. So what I usually do is on all my warm-ups, I just grab the bar. No hook grip or anything. I just grab and hold. I can do that up to 400 or 500 pounds if I needed to. Once I get a little heavy, I use a hook grip because I only have a few sets to do that because my thumb's on especially with a really sharp, pointy, jagged, knurled deadlift bar.
Yeah.
A hook grip for 1 or 2 heavy sets will probably be all you can do before your thumbs turn into hamburger. And then what I do for the heaviest sets,
Never hook grip when I do.
Yeah. I have. I've walked away. I've my last like 450 that way. I'm like,
yeah,
it's like nothing in my body hurts but my thumbs.
Yeah. For the last 3 sets, I just turn my left hand under and I just do the heaviest sets with the alternating grip. That way, I keep a nice balance. I work my grip a little bit. I work my hook grip a little bit. Practice that. And then without destroying my fingers, I just turn to regular grip.
Right.
Yeah.
Most people probably don't
trying that like one time and putting bands on a heavy deadlift. It was like 400 pounds plus some band tension. I did a hook grip and I was like, well, I'm never doing that again. That was a bad decision.
That's why I pulled those speed pulls at Louis' place. With a band, I had the hook grip, and the last one with like 400 plus those double light bands, whatever you had. That was enough to work. I'm done with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you probably don't need to worry about like captains of crush hand grip exercises for most CrossFitters and most people who want to get better at deadlifts. It's probably not something you need to worry about right now. If you're Ed Cohen and you're pulling 950 pounds at 220 pounds body weight, your hands could be a limitation. That's sort of a rare scenario.
Yeah, I kind of advise like the weightlifters if their hands are starting to get beat up too much. It's like, just use straps when you do your pulls. Like, you don't go the whole day using straps. Just throw them in on some pulls and stuff like that. That way, if you're pulling a bar from the floor, 60 times today, if 20 of those times are with the straps because you're doing repetitive pulls, for reps, then it's good there just to save your hands so you can train tomorrow.
That's a good point, man. Yeah. Use these tools to help you train more often. Like, it's not like you always deadlift with straps and you can't do it without it. It's a crutch for you. It makes you feel warm and cozy. You don't want to take them off because then it's hard to hold on the bar. That's bad. What's good is that I've snatched 18 times this week, and if I grab the bar without these straps, my hands are going to rot off. That's a good time to use straps.
Exactly.
It's common sense shit, man. There's no theory involved. Like, straps aren't good or bad. It's like, when's the appropriate time to use them?
Yep.
Same with the belt. Same with knee wraps. When's the appropriate time to use this shit?
And if you're wondering what straps you should be using, I personally, if you're a weightlifter, the Iron Mine straps that are sewn together. They're what's good about those is they're nice and
style, the loop
style, right?
Not the kind that slides up and down with a little strap.
Yeah, it doesn't slide to the other piece, but it's actually the two ends are actually they make. You can get them on Amazon. They're sewn together and they're really thin too. So some of these straps are so thick that, it's just not going to work for weightlifting.
Like the old bodybuilding style that basically like 18 layers of denim sewn into each other. Like you could hold on to a fucking plane trying to take off with it if you could. Like, I know some guys like Iron Man makes some that like for a strongman who's pulling like a tire pull like 1,200 pounds, it's made for that. Like, you don't have to worry about.
You don't need that crazy thing. If it's got flames on it, don't buy it.
A lot of people just use some people just use
Most things in life.
You just use like old like seat belts or anything that's strong material. You just cut a piece and just wrap it around and just hold it like most weightlifters do. I use the kind of like the leather ones that Italian company makes. Who makes the handmade shoes, weightlifting shoes? What's that company? Do you know?
Trying to remember.
Do somebody knows out there? Text one of us if you know.
This is my strength coach from growing up. Mark, you're on the show. Say hi to everybody.
You're holding the earpiece. No, wrong way, Doug. Oh, wait. Is that right?
Anyway, I'll call you later.
Maybe you should
I'll
put it
call
on
you
speaker.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, I think it's about time to wrap up the show. So,
Let's leave it open-ended. So,
we actually do have to go.
yeah, we have to go. But everybody, if you have a question about deadlift, send them in put them on the Facebook page, tweet at us. We can have a little afterwards thing where we kind of check it out and throw some ideas back at you. We probably didn't touch everything about deadlifts this show.
And if you disagree with us, just troll Chris Moore.
Troll me. Go on. Here's what you'll do. You'll go on the YouTube page and go, who is this fucking guy with the Batman shirt who won't shut up on his own show? He keeps wanting to say his fucking opinions. Look, I'm sorry, man, but I'm just a human being here on this show to help you, brother. If you don't like one point I make, it's okay, man. Just ignore me and I'll say something good next time. Just work with me, homie. The world is beautiful. Grass is green. The sun is shining. We all love each other here, man. Let's just lift weights and smile. Your friendly neighborhood Barbell Buddha.
All right, guys. See you next time.
See you guys.
You didn't do any plugs, but I guess that's all right. Fine, fuck it. Who cares?
Oh my gosh.